Hey, it's NPR's Book of the Day. I'm Andrew Limbong. Tareq Baconi's memoir, Fire in Every Direction, is an open, personal, vulnerable memoir about growing up as a queer boy in Jordan, hiding his sexuality from his family, the shame he felt, and finally coming out. But before this book, Baconi was known for his scholarship, writing academically about Hamas and Palestinian politics. And he tells NPR's Leila Fadel about how that type of academic writing was, for him, its own form of hiding. That's coming up.
This message comes from NPR sponsor CNN. Stream Anthony Bourdain, Parts Unknown, Prime Cuts now, exclusively on the CNN app. These rarely seen, never-before-streamed episodes dig deep into the Parts Unknown archives with personal insights from Anthony Bourdain and rare behind-the-scenes interviews about each season. Anthony Bourdain, Parts Unknown, Prime Cuts, now streaming exclusively on the CNN app. Subscribe now at cnn.com/all-access. Available in the U.S. only.
A grandmother flees Palestine as a child on a fisherman's boat. A family is uprooted from Lebanon after a massacre of refugees. A writer grows up with a culture of silence in Jordan. Tareq Baconi, a renowned Palestinian scholar, has written a memoir of 3 generations of displacement. It's called Fire in Every Direction. And Tareq Baconi is with me now. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So in your book, you start with unpacking a yellow box full of letters from a childhood friend named Ramzi. Who was he to you?
Well, Ramzi was, in some ways, my closest friend growing up. He was my neighbor. He was the first boy that I fell in love with. We met when I was around 11, and we were friends for a period of about 6-7 years until I left for university. And during that period, it was a beautiful friendship at its core, and for me, increasingly, a friendship that turned into a romantic interest. And we were each other's, in some ways, I mean, it's funny to say that because we were neighbors, but also pen pals, because we used to write each other letters the whole time that we knew each other.
What was it that had you hold on to those letters with all of your moves throughout adulthood and look back on them as you wrote this coming-of-age story?
I think I always knew that I wanted to write this book because the way that our friendship ended was brutal and had misunderstood what I was trying to do and say. So I always felt that I wanted to salvage my narrative. But also the letters were precious. They were a part of him that I still had. After our friendship ended, we didn't speak, so we haven't spoken in more than 25 years.
Wow.
And it felt that his letters were just a testament to that period of my life, at least.
Central to this book is growing up in Amman, Jordan. You really keep part of who you are and yourself a secret, almost even from yourself. And you start to fall in love with this boy, Ramzi, and you describe it as wearing a mask. What happens when you start to peek out from behind the mask and confess your feelings?
Well, I mean, the mask was also something that protected me in the sense that I was afraid of what it would mean to acknowledge these feelings, and the mask would help me pretend that everything was as it should be. And that was sort of increasingly unsustainable until, obviously, there's a confession of those feelings to him at some point, and the mask sort of comes off.
As you try to stifle yourself, you find parallels in your mother's story. You describe her moving from Lebanon to Jordan, stifling a life of protest, trading it for a domesticated life. You write, quote, "A good one, just not the life that she had imagined for herself and the fire within her, until she learned to control it. It burned in every direction around her." What about her story resonated with your own story?
I think when I was growing up, I couldn't quite understand why my mom was so angry. And with time, I began to understand that the same way that silences shaped my life and made me smaller and prevented me from being the whole of who I am, those silences also impacted her. There were things she couldn't talk about. There were forms of politics she couldn't embody. And so she also was made smaller. And as a result of that, became angry and bitter.
Throughout the book, you use this Arabic word, aib, shame, which I'm very familiar with too. Arab American woman growing up, and you just like, this is aib. You can't do this. You can't be like this. And that was sort of the start of your mother's life with your father, right? Like, you can't just be dating now that you're in Jordan. We don't do this. You have to get married. And I just wonder, like, that theme, how it shaped the narrative.
Well, I mean, the notion of aib, of shame, I think is very oppressive and it's very resilient. Wherever you are, whether you're growing up in an Arab family in the US, in the West, or back home, I think the strictures of aib are very confining. But I think that notion of shame, I was really attracted to it or interested in it because it's completely shaped my life. And, my experience as a queer boy growing up, my mom's experience as a political feminist who's working to organize and to be a committed activist, how the same notions of aib shape us.
And you know what I found so beautiful about your story was that it was your story without judgment necessarily of the culture that you came from. It was this, you still love who you are in all of its facets. Palestinian, growing up in Jordan, from a family that had to flee through all these places. There was not an anger or a rage towards that. How did you hold both of those things?
Well, because there is love,
Yeah.
there is love. And this question, this idea of aib, of shame, part of the reason I find it frustrating is because what are we hiding from? We're so much bigger and we're so much better and we're so much more honest when we hold our humanity in all of its complexities. Why do we try to make ourselves smaller? And so I think the love is there. I don't know if I agree that there's no anger.
Okay, let me rephrase. Yes, you definitely have anger. And there's also parts of your life where you're like, I'm going to reject this part of my life for now.
Right. Yes, and I think that was very hard, coming out of Jordan sort of after the collapse of this period of unrequited love, the collapse of this friendship, and I leave. And I think, you know what, I don't want to be here. This is a community that's excised me, that's rejected me. And I want to move to, somewhere like London that's able to hold my sexuality without judgment. And obviously that comes with a price. At the time, I don't understand that living in the West is also dealing with Western racism and with Western colonialism, and I don't quite understand that yet. But there is a period where I reject everything, and I reject sort of being an Arab man, and I have this aspiration to pass as a liberal in the West.
So in college in London in 2003, you're going through this political awakening, but you've also been going through this very personal awakening for yourself. And there's a point where you tell your mother, I'm a gay man, and she listens and she hears you and she says, okay, we got to tell your dad. And you go back and tell your dad. What was that conversation like?
It was very difficult. I mean, the first time I had tried to tell him after everything erupted with Ramzi, he sort of dismissed it and said, it's just a phase, it's fine. And I go back into the closet for about 7 years. And so when I come back to this realization that, no, I am a gay man and I need to tell my mom and then my dad, I know that this time I will have to deal with whatever repercussions will unfold. I knew that that was the beginning of a journey for them and a continuation of one for me. And so I was scared about how to have this conversation. What would it mean? I was prepared to not see him for a long time after that. I approached it with a lot of trepidation, and actually my mom did as well, because she put sedatives in his coffee to make sure.
Just drug him a little for this one.
Just drug him a little, which, in hindsight, Arab mama in an Arab home, she knows what she's doing.
Oh, man. When you tell your dad, he says, and you said damaging things, and I'm sure this was hurtful to hear, he says you cannot live in Jordan anymore, that this is no longer the place for you. When you go to Haifa and find your grandmother's childhood home that she was displaced from in 1948, you cannot bring yourself to ring the doorbell. It seemed Like you were searching for home. Have you found that?
Yes, I have. I have found that. My concept of home now is in my chosen family. It's in the community that I've cultivated. It's, I feel at home in Jordan. I feel at home in London. I feel at home in Palestine, in different cities I've lived in. And home has come to mean something else to me. It's come to mean the people in my life that I love and that love me and that form a part of a community with me that has shared values and shared politics. It's not this sense of needing to go back to somewhere. I think it's my concept of it has evolved.
It was very heartwarming to read near the end of the book where your dad just like loves your husband. He's like, when are you coming back to Beirut? It's just a totally things changed. Like once you were open and clear to them about who you were and that you went back down from who that was.
Absolutely. I think that he surprised me in so many ways. My dad has passed now, but
I'm so sorry.
Before he passed away, I just couldn't believe where he got to and how he embraced me. And it really affirmed my impulse that, these silences, who are they serving? My relationship with my father is was much more loving and more honest than it ever was when I was hiding parts of myself from him.
You say in your book, and you said earlier, that you've been writing this memoir for nearly 20 years, that it's always been an idea there for you. And that's most of your adult life. Mm-hmm. What made you finish it now, in this moment?
Well, I was always scared of writing this book. I didn't know where it would take me. I also don't think that I was prepared emotionally to do all of the work that it would require of me. And so I distracted myself with other writing. And my first book came out in about 2018. That took 10 years of my life. So the first, I guess, decade of my adult life. And then when I published that first book, it wasn't even a conscious decision. I just immediately turned to this. I knew that I had been hiding in that first book and that it was time to come to this. So I started writing this book in 2018. And I could have never imagined it coming out at a moment of genocide. This is just not the universe that I had imagined this book being published in. It's not the universe I imagined we could be living in. But it's been a big part of my life for many years, and I just turned to it when I felt that I was able to meet what it required of me emotionally.
I mean, you talk about your first book, which is a very well-known book called Hamas Contained, a totally different book. What was it like writing such a personal work that speaks to this larger question around displacement and loss and war and belonging?
It was challenging in ways that I hadn't necessarily anticipated. Writing analytically or writing academically is important, but it's also a way of hiding. At least it was for me.
Yeah.
And this book was a way of going into the lived experience. What did it mean or what does it mean that I'm the grandson of 4 refugees from Palestine? And in that way, I found it painful in many ways, but also cathartic and important for me on a personal level. The funny thing is I'm a very private person, and I would have never imagined writing a memoir, but actually writing this book was the only way I could really confront myself and sit with myself and sort of embrace who I've become as a person in all of its different facets. Yeah.
Is it freeing to have it in the world?
Well, we'll find out. I keep saying this is either the bravest or the stupidest thing I've done, and we'll find out soon enough.
Tareq Baconi is the author of Fire in Every Direction. Thank you, Tareq.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, Andrew here, the host of NPR's Book of the Day podcast. And yeah, I love new books, but there's just something about rereading an old favorite. On our new limited series, Books We've Loved, we're revisiting some classics, from Pride and Prejudice to Dune to everything in between, and talking about why they're worth reading today. Listen to NPR's Books We've Loved right on this podcast feed every Saturday on the NPR app or wherever you get your podcasts.
This message comes from Schwab. Everyone has moments when they could have done better, like cutting their own hair or forgetting sunscreen, so now you look like a tomato. Same goes for where you invest. Level up and invest smarter with Schwab. Get market insights, education, and human help when you need it. Learn more at schwab.com.
This message comes from Mint Mobile. Starting at $15 a month, make the switch at mintmobile.com/switch. $45 upfront payment for 3 months. 5 gigabyte plan equivalent to $15 a month. Taxes and fees extra. First 3 months only. See terms.
Support for NPR and the following message come from Rosetta Stone, the perfect app to achieve your language learning goals no matter how busy your schedule gets. It's designed to maximize study time with immersive 10-minute lessons and audio practice for your commute. Plus, tailor your learning plan for specific objectives like travel. Get Rosetta Stone's lifetime membership for 50% off and unlimited access to 25 language courses. Learn more at rosettastone.com/NPR.